Okay, we are still in Romans. Romans, of Paul's books, of Paul's letters, is the most extensive of Paul's writings. Again, these are letters. These are conversational letters that address theological topics. And Romans is the most extensive of those. Many notable theologians claim Romans as the most significant letter in the New Testament. Many revivals claim that a new understanding of Romans brought revival and healing and all kinds of stuff. Outline is briefly, if you see here, condemnation, justification, condemnation, justification, sanctification, and then vindication for the future redemption of Israel. So I will walk you through that very quickly. Okay, there we go, clicks. Okay, pagans are under God's wrath because they reject him. So that's the condemnation. So pagans are just people that don't know God. They, again, sort of have a pass, I guess, because they don't know enough. So you get this whole natural theology in which somebody in a village in the middle, of the desert that has never known God, do they have an excuse? And there's different thinkings on this. Some would say that just nature itself would cause you to ponder a creator, and then God could come along. And so there is lots of stories of that, of people who have said, I feel like I worship something. I don't really have a name for it. And so there's the pagan. We would be in the Jews and Gentiles category of people that know God exists and have every opportunity to figure that out. So, but we cannot be righteous by our own power. We cannot figure out how to be sinless. If you've ever tried, you can't really go a whole day without like a negative thought, or we just do not have what it would take to be perfect and sinless. Justification is the impartation of God's righteousness by faith in Jesus Christ. So we are justified by God saying, yes, you are good enough, even though you are sinful, you are working on it. This justification is actually provided because Christ was the substitute for what we deserve. What we deserve is to be on a cross. What we get instead is the grace and love of Jesus. Christ's death substituted our death. So we deserve to be on a cross, but we are not, because we are sanctified by Christ. So he talks about this. This is an extensive topic in Romans. So when you hear those, justification and sanctification by Christ and substitutionary death, that is all from the book of Romans. That all comes from Romans. Okay, justification by faith makes all equal before God. So all you really have to do is have faith in God and be in a loving relationship with God, and give the law its rightful place of condemning sin. So, we all don't like it. We have a sense of justice. We do. We have a sense of justice when, someone is oppressed or hurting or being abused. We don't like it, and that is the same system of justice God has. So sanctification is the impartation of God's righteousness in and through the believer to conform them progressively into the image of Jesus Christ. So this is very theological knowledge, very theological sounding, and this is the book of Romans. It's more complicated, and it is essentially the idea of sanctification is that once you know God, once you believe in Jesus, through prayer and study and community of other believers, you will over time become more like Jesus. You will be more in the image of Jesus. So that is the process of sanctification. And many different denominations have widely varying degrees of the process of sanctification and what that looks like in a believer's or a life of one of their church members. Okay, so that's Romans. It's a long book. And written to the Roman citizens, who are, again, the Roman Empire capital. Arguably the most important people in the Roman Empire. Okay, we move from there to the Corinthians. I'll put myself up here. Okay, I probably have to move around a little bit. Okay, Corinthians. Paul's letter to the Corinthians deals sort of with the challenges of Christians living in a hostile culture. Corinth is a hostile culture. It is really the whole Roman Empire is a hostile culture. But Corinth is like, yeah, it's hostile. It's a lot of stuff's going on. Again, one of the local churches, and Paul addresses very specific issues with them. He hopes the issues will be resolved so he doesn't have to come back to the church and handle it themselves. This is definitely like a parent schooling their child. Don't make me stop this car. Listen, I need you to stop having sex with your mom. Stop it. Stop it, or I'm going to have to stop the car. I'm going to have to come to Corinth, and we're going to have to talk about this whole incest situation because it has to stop. It's just one of the many things that he had to talk to the Corinthians about. Corinth was the capital city and the center of Aphrodite worship. So this is also the most graphic description of immorality in the New Testament, like Aphrodite's temples, not for the weak, right? Some very interesting things were happening. Very graphic, more so if you speak Greek. 1 Corinthians was a second letter because the first letter he sent really upset people, so he refers to that in this letter. He's like, oh, I'm sorry that I was so harsh with you the first time. And then he goes on to be harsh again. So I don't... his first letter that we do not have was very harsh and it was misunderstood, but we don't have that letter. There's 3 moral issues that he deals with. The Corinthians, incest. Again, stop it with the incest. If it's your mom or your stepmom or your sister, no, we're not doing that. Litigation between believers. He was like, stop suing each other and fighting. It's bad. It's like bad PR, just bad morale. Stop it. And sexual immorality with prostitutes, right? Spreads diseases, and prostitutes weren't usually like super consenting. So let's just not. He also gave spiritual answers to some questions that he had gotten. So he gives theological answers. And he ends with love one another, right? If you love one another, not too much, not loving your mom like that. Nope. But love one another with a godly love. 2 Corinthians is the second / sort of third, because the first one we don't have. Is a little more personal. He addresses the highs and lows of how he's doing. He talks a little bit about more like himself. It's more like a letter you might get from your grandma. Hey, today I went, and had, breakfast with my friend. So he's a little more cordial in talking about the highs and lows of his own life. It was written not only after 1 Corinthians, but also after a visit from Paul. So Paul wrote the letter that was misunderstood, and then he wrote 1 Corinthians, and then he actually came to Corinth, and now he's writing 2 Corinthians, if that gives you a timeline here. A visit and from Paul to Corinth, and he upset them. He was too harsh with them, so he wants to just tell them again how great they are, but they need to get it together. Frail human ministers carry the gospel message. So he's like, we are all frail, we all sin, don't be discouraged, but stop it. Affliction is shared among all, and it forces us to rely on God. So again, this is a lot of people, it's bad. Like, people are at war, people are enslaved, it's bad. So that's the affliction, and he wants everyone to sort of bear one another's burdens. Reminds them that God is the God of comfort, with the previous things that he corrected in 1 Corinthians. And then when he came, he wants that all wrapped up, essentially. At the end of 2 Corinthians, he's like, listen, I need everybody to get it together. I need everybody to stop doing weird stuff. And then I need you to focus on spreading the gospel message. And also we need to make a collection for Jerusalem because there's a famine and it's bad. So he's essentially saying, yes, I know that you're afflicted by many bad things. Like, bad things are happening, but it forces us to rely on God. God is the God of comfort. I know it's bad right now. Also, reminder, stop doing weird stuff. So that's kind of in the middle there. And he ends it with, get it together. We're going to go about ministry, and then we're going to take an offering for Jerusalem because there's famine there. And that's kind of 2 Corinthians in a nutshell. Okay, next video, Galatians.